Hi, everyone, and welcome to Recovery Live, supporting Black women's recovery and resilience. We are so happy that all of you could join us today. My name is Courtney Williams, and I am Program Coordinator with C4 Innovations. Next slide, Dina. This event is brought to you by C4 Innovations, and C4 works to promote, advance, and improve recovery, wellness, and housing stability. As an organization, we are committed to reducing disparities and achieving equitable outcomes. We achieve this work by partnering with service organizations, communities, and systems to develop and implement research-based solutions that are person-centered, recovery-oriented, trauma-informed, and equity-focused. We conduct trainings, technical assistance, consultations, evaluations, and research for organizations that provide social services, primary and behavioral health care, and housing support. For more information and to stay up to date on all things C4, please visit our website at c4innovates.com to sign up for a listserv or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, where we post regularly. Next slide. Okay, for some quick housekeeping items. Recovery Live events are very interactive. You engage directly with our presenters and each other through the live chat box. The presenters will share some of their initial thoughts, and then we would love to get into a discussion with all of you. Audience members are in listen-only mode, so please feel free as the presentation is going on to introduce yourselves, ask questions, share ideas and resource links, or let us know about your technical difficulties by typing them into the QA or chat box. Please make sure to select all panelists and attendees in the drop-down to participate in the conversation. Today's event will, next slide. Today's event will last approximately 1 hour and is being recorded. The recording link will be shared with all registrants after the event. It will also be available on the C4 YouTube channel listed on this slide. If, as you are listening to this content, you feel your organization may need some technical assistance around this topic or any other topic, please feel free to email us at training@c4innovates.com. Next slide. Okay. To get to the reason you all are here, we are beyond fortunate to have some really amazing presenters with us today who will be talking about Black women's resilience and recovery, a topic that is so important yet often overlooked. I am so honored to be able to introduce our wonderful presenters today. We have Dr. Ayanna Jordan, Assistant Professor of Psychiatry at Yale University School of Medicine, Enola Aird, Founder and President of Community Healing Network, and Dr. Ashley Stewart, Training Curriculum Development Specialist at C4 Innovations. And with that, I'd like to get us started and turn things over to Dr. Jordan.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction. I am excited to be here and really bring the energy for this topic. As a Black woman, I have never, ever been in a space or been asked to talk about what it means to promote resilience, what it means to establish recovery and wellness for other Black women. And for that, I am so excited. So thank you to the organizers. Thank you to C4 for having me. We're going to have a good time. All right, next slide. This is something that I have always tried to integrate for my own self-preservation. And so I want to share it with you and really think about the preservation of who we are as an act of resistance. So Audre Lorde said, caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. So when we're thinking about self-care, it's beyond getting our nails done, our hair done, although that's important to me, but really thinking about what are the ways in your life that you can establish time to center and affirm the humanity of who you are. Next slide. All right, so let's get into it. Why are we here and why do we have to be so deliberate and intentional about protecting ourselves? Part of it is related to the trope of the strong Black woman, which in my slides I'll refer to as SBW. And I call it a trope because it really does integrate and kind of dictate or interdigitate in terms of our lives who we are as Black women. Society places expectations on how we act, live, and behave. And why this can be very dangerous is because it has intergenerational impact. So what do I mean by that? Is that it can be passed down and modeled for many Black girls young ladies and women in terms of how Black women are supposed to be and show up in spaces, really how we're supposed to be socialized. And we see this through media, right? It's reinforced these particular stereotypes in our television shows. So Olivia Pope, right? Kelly Washington, she played the strong Black woman in Scandal, and Viola Davis and How to Get Away with Murder, right? There's even a song, I don't know how many of you guys are older than me, but there was a song called Superwoman that came out that was, again, talking about this stereotype. The issue with this is that it portrays Black women with this limitless emotional strength, right? That we can handle all things no matter what. And that idea is really imprinted into our subconscious or our psyche in thinking Black women can endure and rise to the top, right? Without any help or support. Next slide. And so before I kind of criticize the trope of the strong Black woman, I wanted to put into some context. Where did it come from, right? And this is the work of hashtag Cite Black Woman, Sister Citizen from Melissa Harris Perry, where she talks about this idea of the strong Black woman really being necessary to counteract some of the negative stereotypes that were present about Black women. And those were three: the Mammy, the Jezebel, and Sapphire. And Mammy, I gave you a picture, I wasn't Gone with the Wind. She's this neutral kind of Black woman, grandmother figure who can take care of the white folks and make it all better, right? Handle everything. Not political whatsoever, kind of stood in her place. And then the Jezebel shows up and sexualizes Black woman, right? And don't get me wrong, there is a power and strength that comes with our femininity, but to only see that as one part of us is the problem. And so the strong Black woman was really kind of counteract that representation. And then finally, Sapphire as the angry Black woman, that's ABW, right? Loud and emasculating. Again, there's nothing wrong with being loud. I'm a loud Black woman, but seen in the fullness of who we are. And so that's really where the strong Black woman was centered to kind of counteract these historical contexts of Black women. Next slide. This is the Superwomen Schema that comes as a result of the strong Black woman stereotype. And this is work presented by, again, hashtag Cite Black Woman, Dr. Cheryl Biscombe, when she says that there are 5 parts of the Superwoman Schema. This perceived obligation to present an image of strength, perceived obligation to suppress emotion, resistance to vulnerability or resistance to getting help or depending on others, a motivation to succeed despite limited resources, and then finally, the prioritization of caregiving or providing for those of others as opposed to taking care of your own needs, right? So this is the 5 parts of the Superwoman Schema. And I want us to remember this as much as possible because this schema really does lead to negative consequences. Next slide. And some of those are often ignored, right? Those are things like suffering in silence. This idea of Black women not having access to psychological safety because we're so concerned about taking care of other people. Worsening health outcomes. What does that look like, Dr. Dornan? That means it affects our sleep because we don't have anywhere to put these emotions. We have to live up to this particular ideal of who we are. It affects our relationships, our ways in which we interact with food. This is data from the CDC that says more than half of Black women over the age of 20 are obese, right? So it's literally killing us, the stress related to this trope. We're more likely to develop hypertension. We're more likely to develop hypertension at an earlier age. And then we will look at white and Latinx women, we're more likely to develop these cardiovascular problems more so than our contemporaries. And then Black women have higher rates of hypertension than Black men. And then at the very kind of worst of this is spectrum of this is what happens when we can't contain, right, this ideal of who we should be. It leads to maladaptive coping skills, right? So those are things like drinking, an increase in substance use, inability to manage our anxiety. You know, when people say we had a nervous breakdown, things like that. All right, next, please. And I'm going to finish up here. So I thought it was important for us as we move into this discussion to really mirror this trope of the strong Black woman with all that we've had to endure over the years and really centuries, but put that in context in terms of what has been going on in the last 2 months and giving ourselves permission, like Audre Lorde said, to practice self-preservation, right? We are dealing with real vicarious trauma. I put a reference to the paper that we just published in Lancet Psychiatry that explains what that is and what happens on a physiological or biological basis as a result of vicarious trauma. Being affected by seeing Black people suffer, police killings, increased deaths through COVID, seeing the hypocrisy of what happens when we're trying to protest or support BLM, and then you got these white folks with the insurrection storming the Capitol, right? These are all things that are traumatic that we have really had to engage with and really not being given the permission to center ourselves. I want to engage us to do that. Another concept that I want to introduce into this space is network stress. Okay, this is also Dr. Discom's work, where she says you start to carry the stressors of the people in your circle and their stress, right? So you take on the stress of the people that you are associated with. And this is a powerful contributor to negative mental health outcomes, but also may account for some of the disproportionate rates of low birth weight and preterm delivery that we see in Black women that's not protected by your money, not protected by your access to health insurance, right? So understanding that this network stress, we have to be able to mitigate it. It's not just a matter of feeling good, it's a matter of survival and quality of life. So the last slide, and then I'll be quiet because I'm coming up on my time, is the power of a liberated space. And I introduce this in every talk that I'm giving, whether it's science or addiction or whatever, is getting rid of this whole construct of a safe space. Because we know as Black women, what safety do we have? It really depends on us, right? Because there are very few spaces that are genuinely safe for us, okay? So instead, I'd like you to imagine a liberated space where we center ourselves as Black women, where we're not going to apologize for showing up any way that we need to, whether we have to be vulnerable, whether we have to cry, whether we want to be provocative. How we are inherently has value. Being willing to speak up, share your point of view. Other people may not agree, and that's okay. I love this quote, speak truth even if your voice shakes. I don't know who said it, but whoever said it, please let me know. Yes, yes, I'm here for this, yes. And then what I say in this liberated space is that often in that discomfort or tension, whether it be within ourselves, we're not used to showing up as our authentic selves, or even amongst each other, often in that tension allows for growth. So I'm excited for the next 45 minutes. We're going to be in a liberated space. And after me is one of my heroes, trailblazers with the Community Healing Network, is the one and only Enola Aird, who, because of her ability to believe in the curation of liberated spaces, has allowed me to develop and grow into the scholar I am. So thank you so much, Enola Aird, and I'm excited to hear from you.
I thank you so much, my young sister. I thank you so much for your spirit, for your energy, for your beauty, for your brilliance. Thank you very much to C4 Innovations and Courtney Williams. Thank you, Sister Dr. Jordan, for that just heart-rending and just empowering introduction. It is truly my honor and my privilege to be here with you and with Sister Dr. Stewart. I really am in awe of your accomplishments and all that you have done. The question that I would like to put to the audience and ask us to consider this afternoon is, what is the root cause of so much of the trauma that we as Black people experience, and particularly as Black women? I want to tell you a story that the roots of that trauma run deep. We tend to think about the 400 years that we observed, commemorated 2 years ago now, I guess. But I want to make very clear that it's been more than 600 years, more than 600 years across the world. But the first thing I want you to know is this: until 600 years ago, Africa, the place from which we descend, was the home of ancient civilizations, which, in the words of the Harvard scholar Henry Louis Gates, were just as splendid and glorious as any on the face of the earth. Africa is the home of all of humanity's common female genetic ancestor, mitochondrial Eve. It is the home of the first human beings who built the first communities and created art and culture and technologies. But Africa is also the richest continent on the face of the earth in terms of natural resources. And that made it ripe for exploitation. And that led to the transatlantic trafficking in human beings that began in the 1400s and was led by the Portuguese, a fellow named Prince Henry, if you want to look it up. And that's where I contend the seeds of our trauma began to be planted. Almost all societies have enslaved human beings. That's not unusual, but the enslavement of Africans by Europeans was different. To enrich themselves, European nations enslaved African people, and yes, we're not going to argue about it, it was in many instances with the support of other Africans. But Europeans justified this enslavement and exploitation of Africa by replacing Africa's rich history with the lie of white superiority and Black inferiority. The lie marked an entire continent and all of its people as inferior. That lie created a ranking of humanity with white people at the very top and Black people at the very bottom, and sometimes, as we have seen with our own eyes in recent days, sometimes entirely outside of the circle of humanity. That lie, next slide, that lie effectively cast Black people out of the circle of humanity, out of the human family. Next slide. Every institution was pressed into service: academia, scholarship, everything that we could muster as a Western world was pressed into service to convince the world. W.E.B. Du Bois called it the greatest propaganda campaign in human history to discredit a race of people was undertaken, and it was effectively undertaken, and it has had its effect. For the last 600 years, every institution of the Western world has carried the message that all things African, including its people, are to be devalued. The result, next slide, has been a systematic degradation, objectification, commodification, dehumanization, all the things our sister talked about, the stereotypes, the ways of demeaning and degrading us, our children, over centuries. Next slide. In 2008, in experiments that subliminally flashed Black or white male faces on a screen for a fraction of a second, just enough to prime college students, researchers found that there was a consistent, persistent association between Black people and apes. They found no ape association with non-Black people, not with white people, not with Asian people, not with Latino people, unless they were also of African ancestry. According to the principal investigator for this study, Her name is Jennifer Eberhardt, and she teaches at Stanford. She said there is one old race battle that we are still fighting. That is the battle for Blacks to be recognized as fully human. The truth, of course, is that modern science, next slide, has demonstrated that there is only one race. Humans are 99.9% the same at the level of the human genome. But the lie is still with us today, negatively affecting our people's perceptions of us, and sadly, all too often, our perceptions of ourselves. The lie is the reason why walking, talking, drinking coffee, eating ice cream in your own home, or doing anything else while Black can be dangerous, traumatic, and even deadly. The lie is the reason for the gross disparities that we hear about all the time between the lives of Black people and the lives of white people in nearly every area of life. And the lie, as Dr. Jordan has suggested, is the underlying reason why the average Black person suffers from higher levels of chronic stress, they call it allostatic load, than the average white person at every socioeconomic level. So money can't save us. And Black women have a higher allostatic load than Black men. So we pretty much have the highest allostatic load. That constant stress damages Black minds, Black spirits, and Black bodies, leading to what is called weathering, a premature biological aging, and serious physical, physiological, psychological, and behavioral health consequences. The lie is devastating to our health and our well-being, which is why the Black community urgently needs a movement for emotional emancipation from the lie, for emotional reparations, healing, wellness, and empowerment. The movement for emotional emancipation, which is being led by Community Healing Network in collaboration with the Association of Black Psychologists, is about deepening our collective understanding of the impact of this lie on our emotional lives, on our relationships, and our health. It is about detoxifying our minds and our spirits, about freeing ourselves of those habits that were born over centuries that undermine our self-love, our love for each other, our ability to trust each other, and our ability to work effectively to change the condition that we're in. Our signature program, the Emotional Emancipation Circle, is a self-help support group process that offers social support, promotes a strong sense of identity, and offers training in emotional wellness skills, all of which promote resilience, about which we'll hear more later. Resilience, in turn, has been shown to help reduce the effects of chronic stress in our lives and lighten allostatic loads, and help us get back into, as Denzel Washington says in the movie The Great Debaters, back into our righteous minds, no longer polluted by the lie of Black inferiority, but grounded and driven by the truth of Black humanity. Community Healing Network is working to make 2020 to 2030 the decade to embrace the truth of Black humanity. What we offer in support of Black women's resilience and recovery is a growing global grassroots movement for healing from and ending the trauma that has been caused by the centuries-old lie that Black people are inferior. We offer a global initiative that is mobilizing Black people all across the diaspora to reclaim our rightful place in the circle of humanity. We invite you to join us in this movement because our children and our ancestors are waiting for us to end this anguish, and we can do it. So I'm happy to talk more about what our strategies are, how we do it, but I want to now introduce Dr. Ashley, Sister Dr. Ashley Stewart, whose focus is on language. And we think language is very, very important. One quick example, when we started out, we were always talking about the lie. And people were saying, well, you know, the lie is so frontal, why can't you use the word myth? And we said to them and to ourselves, if you can't tell the truth when you're seeking the truth, then you're really in a problem. You got a problem. So we got to tell the truth. And Dr. Stewart has really spent a lot of time focusing on that, as well as focusing on personal accountability. And again, I am just thrilled to be sitting between these two extraordinary young sister doctors. And I'm delighted to introduce you, Dr. Stewart.
Thank you so much. Woo! Black women are resilient, right? I'm
And
so
that be
honored. I'm so honored to be here and be in this space and to talk about personal accountability and specifically about how discomfort has been a barrier to us really leaning in, saying the things that need to be said and doing the things that need to be done. For example, maybe even some folk in this room are moving into a different zone, panic zone. You're like, I've heard all this before, I know all this before, but I'm uncomfortable. And that place of trying to seek comfort has been such a barrier to us leaning into what has been the reality and what continues to be the reality for Black women. And so today we're going to talk about how language is not only so important, but the ways that we can hold ourselves accountable to increasing our critical awareness of not only how we get to observe Black women struggle, but that we also perpetuate, benefit from, and have the opportunity to debate or talk about whether or not to reduce the trauma experienced by Black women. So that is where we're going to start this conversation today. And before I even jump into that, I just want to take a moment. I see a lot of personal truths coming out in the chat. If you're writing in the chat, I'm seeing it all there. I want to honor the Black women who are in this space, who are also experiencing this session, this webinar through the lens of a Black woman, through the gaze and through the observance of multiple other identities that maybe some truly can appreciate the struggle and others who will never really truly understand the complexity of it. So I just want to take a moment to honor the Black women in this space. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? All right. There is a complexity in discussing racial trauma and discussing the lies and discussing the stereotypes, the stigmas. All of this is very deeply rooted. And based on our positionality or based on our privilege, we might not even realize the gaps in our knowledge and understanding the complexity of it. And so we occupy and navigate these spaces where we're talking about, let's move toward diversity and inclusion. Well, if we're not centering and focusing on equity first and foremost, then most likely our diversification efforts are performative. If you don't have a true appreciation for the complexities of suffering that people have experienced, then when you are creating this space, the diverse folk in the room can't feel included, right? So we have to center and focus on equity, which means increasing our knowledge. Perhaps you had heard some of the things that we shared today. You were familiar with the ideas of scientific racism. Perhaps you haven't. But one thing is for sure, there is information about it. And the fact that a lot of us don't even get to experience or learn about this is also part of the systemic and structural oppression. So if something comes up today and you want to lean into it, I highly encourage you to, because that's what equity takes. It takes action. So race-based and gender-based stress is compounding. It is repeated exposure directly over and over again. And so we talk about this a lot. We talk about compounding stress. We talk about intersectionality. We'll even talk about terms like microaggressions. But what tickles me is that microaggressions then made it into the dictionary, and it's like this subtle, sometimes discriminatory thing that might possibly could happen. But the original definition of microaggressions, I think, is a really great way to lean into the complexity of it, because I think most people probably in this space are familiar with the term. But what we don't talk about when we're talking about compounding racism or overlapping racism is that it's not a one-time thing. It is repeated and recurring over and over every single day. The allostatic load, the weathering, that is what's present in these covert and overt forms of racism. There's no break. It's waking up and thinking about it in every single aspect and facet of your life. So when we talk about Black women resilience, it's navigating that, not only through the intersections of our identities in terms of, the many ways that we identify, that being Black, being a woman, if folks are trans women, all of these things are overlapping and intersecting and impacting us class, age, right? We are experiencing these things collaboratively. And it's daily. It's not sometimes, it's daily. So when we talk about microaggressions and people are describing it as this once discriminatory thing that you experience, none of us should experience discrimination, but that's not what we're talking about here. That is not even touching the surface of what we're talking about, because that term was intentionally derived from a very intentional place of subjugation, of marginalization. And then we have the term intersectional. Everyone talks about intersectionality. We incorporate it a lot in our D&I work, but intersectionality is really critically focusing on compounding oppressed identities. If we lean into the work of Kimberly Crenshaw, we can see that there's a huge complexity to it. It's also involving navigating the ways that people are interacting in society. And it also includes a lot of variables that relate to critical race theory, which goes into a whole framework for how people are experiencing systemic and structural suppression. We talk a lot about marginalized folk. I remind people in this space, there are no marginal people. We are systemically and structurally marginalized by systems, and that's important to acknowledge as well. There is an urgency to this, an urgency to act, not responding, with engaging soft, light approaches. That's a luxury. Slow incremental change, not leaning into it all the way. Those are luxuries for people whose lives and have time to spare and whose lives are not at stake. We're talking about life and death. We're talking about health and wellness. We're talking about authenticity. Every space I go in, I have to make a critical energy expend. I have to expend critical energy to think about how to talk, how to posture myself, all of these different things, because it has real life tangible outcomes. That is energy depletion. That is wearing and tearing, right? And so we're engaging with all of this, but we're not really talking about it. And when we address it, we want to address it lightly. That's because you're not experiencing the impact of it, right? And so where is your privilege? Where's your positionality to be able to enter this conversation and engage with it? Again, perception is data. Equating suffering negates the complexity of racial and gender identity, and disbelief can be a deflection method. So a lot of times we'll hear about these things and we'll well, this makes me uncomfortable. We'll lean out of the conversation, but the reality of it is that deflection has been a form of white dominant culture and white supremacy. And so we're going to lean in, we're going to have the conversation as it needs to be had. And then for folks who are thinking about how to take this context that we're talking today and apply it, I want folks to sit with and assess the privilege to be able to sit back and discuss how, if, and when to support Black women's resilience and recovery. And in that in itself lies the power. This is not an if or when, it is a how, and how quickly, immediately can we do so? Because to even have a conversation about it is itself an exorbitant amount of privilege. You can go to the next slide, which is my last slide, so we can get into some conversations. So a lot of times we'll sit in these things and we're like, geez, I mean, this is a lot to hold, right? But I also want to honor that Black women have been holding this. And so a lot of times we'll lean in and we'll say, that's so unfair. We should stand up. We should stand up for them. This is a us conversation, okay? So if you're sitting there and you're observing something, the critical question, the paradigm shift that needs to happen is, how do I perpetuate this type of harm? How do I contribute to this type of harm? And how do I benefit from it? And how can I stop? And that's the paradigm shift that we need to have. Challenge ourselves and challenging other people. If you have oversee an organization or you play a role within an organization, how can you begin to challenge and move towards a critical culture shift? Making change for to empower and support the resilience of Black women is not an additive service. It needs to be a part of what you do, period, right? The commitment has to be there. A lot of the systemic and structural oppression is rooted from, fear and intimidation. Well, of course, that's going to upset people when you try and liberate folks who have been systemically oppressed. So you have to commit to it, even when it gets hard, and recognize that the discomfort that we are experiencing and trying to change these white dominant structures are such a small amount of discomfort compared to what we are describing as Black women living through every single day. And also be clear, use clarity, say it what it is. We are really excited about promoting diversity within our organization. I need you to say, we are acknowledging that Black women within the recovery space have not been represented, have not been supported, have not been paid attention to, have not been acknowledged for the complexities of their experience, and we are committed to challenging that. Okay. And then take a holistic approach to resolving our gaps. Urgently examine the multiple layers for your staff or your organization. Internalize, including our own biases. How is it impacting folks interpersonally? These are the different layers of racism: interpersonal, institutional, social, community, as well as structural, cultural, and societal. What are your general values about what is right and what is wrong? And how might that be rooted in something that is in fact contributing to the oppression of Black women? I started this off by saying Black women are resilient. And like that is the truth. And so and also it is also true that we have continued to experience critical harm. And so how are you examining your complicity in that, all of our complicity in that, and moving towards change urgently? Okay. Looking forward to having some conversation. So I have the privilege to turn it back over to Courtney.
Oh, I am in absolute awe of my three sisters right here. This is just an absolutely amazing and powerful conversation. And I want to take a second to just be able to absorb everything that we just heard. We heard so much. But we are going to be moving on to the question and answer portion, but I want to be able to thank Dr. Jordan, Enola, and Dr. Stewart for taking the time to share thoughts and provide such an empowering space for Black women today. So we did get a few questions as you all were going on, and the first question that we got in are, what are behaviors you engage in to preserve your own humanity? And I think, Dr. Stewart, you just touched upon this, but I'm going to ask you to go first, Dr. Jordan, on this one.
Yeah, thank you so much. I and move to emotion almost in this space, because it's not a space that I have access to. And so I do think it's important, again, to just be present in the energy and the realness of what is happening here, because there's power. And even when you were talking, Courtney, and it just, Dr. this, I was like, I want to say to Sister Enola, what can we call you? You are an elder in this space. Do we call you Queen Mother? How do we properly, really just speak truth to power in terms of the knowledge that you dropped, and really the foundation. So I think that is important to state, because how do we navigate the trauma? We have to create the spaces for ourselves. And that's exactly what Community Healing Network has done through the EECs, right? The circles that they have created. So part of it is being very deliberate to engage in community with other Black people who understand the importance of being connected to the motherland, which is Africa, and understanding, and I know I'm breaking up, but understanding our brilliance, because those tools help us to counter the systemic lies and oppression that we face in this country. So we have to understand our value to be able to navigate that. And so I hope that the website is up, because I think that's really important. Another thing, as a psychiatrist, that I always say, we have to get treatment. So part of it is understanding that it's okay to get help, whether that be in therapy, because a lot of us have stuff that have been passed down that's just not right. And it's not because deliberately our grandmothers or our great-grandmothers want to mess us up, but they didn't know, right? So we got to undo some of the trauma, that intergenerational trauma, and that has to be worked out through therapy. Another thing I say is, it's okay to need help and ask for help. We have to counter that. We don't have to do it all by ourselves. There's strength in our community. And then like, I'm not doing anything else, right? Except doing the work that I need. And sometimes white folks want to just take all your time. Can you teach me? Can you do? No, I'm not doing it. And when it gets too much, one of the things that I have, and I realize it's a privilege because I have a job that I can do this, but I say, I'm calling out Black today. I'm calling out Black. Meaning that I need to take some time to rebuild, focus on my own preservation so that I can indeed show up and be well and engage with this trauma. So that's kind of my thoughts.
I'd like to say a word on the question of what I do for my own well-being. Because I'm an elder, I work as hard as I can to become a good ancestor. And I thank you, sister, for raising the question of our Africanness and our need to recover it. Our healing, in our view, at Community Healing Network comes through Sankofa, through going back and fetching to understand what are the values, what are the African values that have sustained us that we are not even fully aware of. And so part of what we do in the emotional emancipation circles, clearly we have to be creating a space, and we do not do therapy in the emotional emancipation circles. We start from the premise that we are each other's medicine, that our healing comes in community. We're not I people, the people who colonized and enslaved African people. We are we people. And so we are focused on the values of Ubuntu and Sawubona. I am because we are. A person is a person through other persons. And my goal in life is to build the best possible relationships. That's what it means to be African to us, as I have learned in the very short period of time that I have been submitting myself to study to understand this, right? Because we live in this Western world, we are by definition miseducated. And our goal must be to properly educate ourselves as to who and whose we are as people of African ancestry. And so I agree that, we need to create liberated spaces. We need to be each other's medicine. We need to be there for each other. And I find, as hard as I work, and my family's like always asking me, why you work so hard? Because it is keeping me alive. It is my purpose. It is my goal, my mission, to do as much as I can to get us back in our righteous minds, to get us back on track. Because this Western world, if we can't see it, let me point out, there is an absolute end to this. This way of being is not sustainable. And it's the African way, the original way, the we way, that must save all of humanity. And so it becomes absolutely critical that we as people of African ancestry get ourselves together, get regrounded in who and whose we are and the values of the original people. What is humanity really about? We did a tour recently and we stopped in Omaha, Nebraska, and where the Malcolm X Foundation is, and a brother said something that I will never forget, and I commend to your meditation, which is, we African people embody in our very incarnation the struggle for the definition of what it means to be human. This is about more than us. It is about one value system that existed, the original value system that was over the last 600 years. They just attempted to crush it in every single way while taking advantage of us in body, mind, and spirit to enrich themselves. It is not just about material things. It is also about spiritual things in the fundamental sense of what is the value system that is best for human beings. It's clearly not theirs, and that is on full display. So we have a responsibility to carry that value system, to reground ourselves and to carry that value system forward in order to save this world.
Dr. Stewart, do you have anything to add?
I see so many great questions coming in, so I'm just going to pass because I think my the beautiful women on here have already answered.
Absolutely.
I also typed my answer in the chat for anybody who missed it.
Another question that we got is, how do we as Black women navigate self-care through trauma? And I think you all started to touch upon this, but it sounds like they want another explanation or further explanation on this.
Yeah, I want to touch on that, and if I can also tie in a question that I saw come in anonymously, kind of bring them together. So in addition to working at C4 and being a curriculum and training specialist, I also train therapists and mental health professionals through the lens of power, race, oppression, and privilege, really looking at bringing in anti-racist approaches into the therapeutic space. And so when we're thinking about healing and self-care, there's also the acknowledgement that not all spaces have been created for our healing. And so it is multifaceted, I believe, in how we lean in and engage. Both for me, saying and naming and addressing forms of racism feels like self-care, but in all spaces that might not be safety. And so I want to acknowledge that as we're specifically talking about recovery, there aren't many recovery spaces where Black women can speak about their unique experience and feel safe. And so it is about finding and creating those spaces. It's about other people recognizing the complexity of it. And the space that we create is where people will lean in. If you're a therapist or you're a mental health professional and you are not a Black person, it is also your responsibility to address your discomfort with talking about racism so that you can create the place in the space so that you don't brush off or minimize or even begin to neglect or negate their experiences of Black women. One of the things I've noticed very quickly is that we tend to pathologize Black women a whole lot. And I might come to you and I might say, I feel unsafe in my neighborhood. I feel like my neighbors are constantly watching me. As a mental health professional, someone might lean in and say, well, let's try to get rid of some of those problematic and anxiety-provoking thoughts, but that's real for me. They actually probably are. And so we have to look at mental health completely differently. So as we're thinking about how to lean in for self-care for ourselves, acknowledging that we need to be in spaces where we're going to be validated, and not all spaces that other folk call self-care are going to feel like self-care for us. It is about saying, what brings me joy? What makes me feel good? Sometimes wearing mismatched clothing is what does it for me. Leaning into that and having that be validated is so important. So I really do encourage people to say, what does self-care, what is it to me? Because it might not be the same things that we are projecting as ideals in society.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just, there's not much that I have to add to that. I think but being very deliberate to having the time to make the time to figure out what really do you need for your own self-preservation. And I think Dr. Stewart said it so nicely, like realizing that is a privilege for sure, but in order to be whole, to be able to navigate the trauma, like you have to center yourself and give yourself permission not to be at the beck and call for everybody else, right? There has to be a time, whether that to just say, let me get in to my own consciousness and figure out what I need. One of the things that I've started to do, and I'm just going to be in terms of transparent here, is Reiki with a Black woman every single week, virtual Reiki. And that allows me to speak to the ancestors, to be in line with that vibration of my spirit, just to be in a mindset to be whole, right? And nobody has to give me permission. I take that time. And I think so just being very deliberate and I think unapologetic and protecting our own space is important. People will take and take and take. I mean, look what happened with Stacey Abrams. She organized the whole thing, and then they were like, can she be responsible for vaccine distribution? It's like, can she just be? She just saved the democracy. You understand what I'm saying? They will take and take and take and take and take. So
I like that. I love that word, unapologetic. And I think it's important for us, we always talk about speaking the truth to power. It's so important for us to take time to speak truth to ourselves, to be with ourselves, to practice enjoying our own company. The thing that I like doing most when I'm not working, and I do love working because working in service to my people, it gives me great joy, is listening to music. listening to music all rooted in Africa. I love Latin music. I love Portuguese music. I love Caribbean music. Anything that brings the winds of Africa to my spirit really enlivens me. And I get to do that while I'm working. And that's just, can't get better than that.
Music is so important. I agree, Enola. It's a one that I often use when I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed.
In fact, I don't think I couldn't go on without it. I mean, my husband knows that if I weren't playing music constantly, I mean, I wouldn't be playing music now if I weren't talking to you. I have to have it. It's just essential to my spirit.
Ashley began to touch upon this. Dr. Stewart began to touch upon this. But how can white people providing services to Black women work to promote resilience and healing? And Dr. Jordan, can you start to touch upon that one as well?
This is problematic for me, honestly, and because I think that I shouldn't say it's problematic, but I guess what it makes it upsets my spirit a bit because white people seem to be capable in so many other areas, but when it comes to being able to engage with us or figure out ways in which they can be responsible, it's like they just don't know where to begin, right? And so one of the things that I've tried to say is it's really not my job to educate white folks. And what I have said is to talk to some of your white brothers and sisters, or the whole notion of the social construct of what it is to be white, but really to get with them in community and figure out what are some other white therapists doing that are working with predominantly Black and brown folks to be able to take care of them in a way, and to align yourself with people that are doing it successfully. Because I think that, again, there's an emotional cost to needing to provide the blueprints over and over and over again when you're very capable. So I don't mean that this is a call, and I don't mean it in a negative manner. I really do say that there has to be an investment in your own education in the same way that you went through training to say, what are the fundamentals and who is really dedicated to this work? And there are some white brothers and sisters out there, and how can I align myself with them? That's my answer. And I'll stop there.
I think that we talk about healing in the Black community, and it's really of the essence, but there's also need for healing amongst white people. I mean, they've got to do their own work. And it's not just educational work. They've got to understand or seek to understand how it is that the dehumanization rooted in the lie of white superiority and Black inferiority has affected them. And that has to be a kind of a course of study, a course of reflection and meditation, and an acknowledgement, first and foremost, that without doing that work, they cannot accurately, adequately be of service to Black folk. And until they do that work, they should not at least know that they have to be doing the work. They have to be on the road because that awareness is crucial. But otherwise, they can do a great deal of danger. If you're coming to save me unaware of your own problems, you're going to do great damage.
Mm-hmm. Amen, Enola. Absolutely. Dr. Jordan, you're on mute. I think you were.
Yeah, and to Enola's point, we see that. We see that in the mental health care system, right? We see unconscious. It's not, I don't think it's deliberate, but we see our people not well cared for, which is why we don't want to go.
Right.
And so
Right.
they try and call us crazy. I say, there's nothing crazy. We're not the ones that are unwell. We don't want to engage in a system that's not culturally informed. So anyway, that's why a lot of my work is really invested in really trying to create systems that are safe for Black folks, period. So nothing's wrong with us. I love what Dr. Stewart said, start from a place of resilience, because we are resilient and we are whole, right? A lot of times we just have to understand that and fortify to understand our brilliance and our wholeness. But anyway, white folks have to do their work. Get with other white folks to do your work. When you're engaging in that process of education, then really engaging with communities of color, you know. But I think there's not too many folks that I have seen that done it well. Let's just say.
Yeah. And I see sometimes people ask folks, you know, like, well, how am I supposed to learn if folks don't teach me? I want to remind folk that not every Black person signed up to be in your organization to be the D&I person. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to teach. That's not their role. That's not their job. And so to ask folks to do it is in itself a form of oppression. It's inconsiderate. And most importantly, it is a perpetuation of that type of privilege. And some folks are occupying the role to engage in those conversations, but it has to be what that person's seeking out to do. You can't just assume that that's someone who's interested in teaching you just because of their own identities. And Dr. Joy DeGroy does a lot of really great work in examining that the processing of white folks' alignment with excessive violence, and talking about, you know, the lynching and burning, and how people, like, what is the processing that needs to happen about being able to watch someone die or contribute to someone's death and then be able to go have a meal. And that is, I would say, 100 years ago, but honestly, I think about what folks did after they saw these mass murders of Black people on TV yesterday, the day before, in the past week. So leaning into that and saying, what is going on with me that I'm able to witness this type of violence, and ask the question, well, what did they do? That is a conditioned form of oppressive ideology that is rooted in the work that white folks need to do, and that is important. And so Dr. DeGroy does write about that. I also recommend My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa, last name's
Menachem.
Menachem. Yes, thank you so much. A phenomenal text, and lean in, do that work for ourselves.
I'm so sad that we're at the top of the hour because we have so many questions, and I know that this conversation could go on and should go on forever. But before we wrap up, I would love to ask our presenters to share some parting words of wisdom to leave us with today. Enola, can I ask you to go first?
Sure. I would like us to think for a minute how amazing we are as Black people, as Black women. We are resilient, but just think how resilient. Every Black person born over the last 600 plus years has been born into a world that profoundly devalues our lives. Every achievement, every act of success, everything that we have done has been done bearing the weight of that lie on our shoulders. I want you to think how much more amazing, how many more accomplishments we will be able to make and achieve when we have finally, and our children, when we finally taken the time to heal. It's not going to take us 600 years. We can get this done. We just have to be focused on intentional, on reclaiming our rightful place in this circle of humanity.
Dr. Stewart, would you like to go next?
Sure thing. I actually just see someone put in the chat, Bonnie shared it with everyone, right? Anti-racist, allyship, these are not labels, these are not titles that you can just have. They're actions. It is something that is some aspect of revoking privilege and positionality. It is about taking responsibility. It's about engaging in critical conversation and taking accountability of learning things that will not and have not been taught to you. And also, I know that there have been a lot of conversations about mental health and about the well-being of Black women. There's also action that has to be taken for the preservation and our own well-being, and to do so unapologetically is so, so important. And so, we will continue, I think our information will be provided. We're happy to have, I'm happy to have the conversation. I want to speak for my colleagues here on the call, but, these are conversations that don't get resolved. There's no resolving this in an hour or hour and a half or 2 day or 4-week session. This is continual work to do. And so, I hope that this is just a stepping point for people to say, I have a lot of work to do, and that lean-in actually happens for true healing.
I'll just say, Ashe, you Black women, you are wonderfully and beautifully made. There is nothing deficient about you, and just really tap in to understand the fullness of your humanity.
And with that, a special thank you to all of you, Dr. Stewart, Dr. Jordan, Enola, everyone that joined us today, for taking the time to sit in on this conversation. We do hope that you'll join us on February 25th as we talk about the resilience and recovery of LGBTQ+ communities of color. A link to a satisfaction survey will pop up when we close this online meeting room. Please do give us feedback on our presentation today. And if you do have any additional questions, or I know there are some that we were not able to get to, please feel free to put them in the satisfaction survey and we will get them over to our presenters. Please consider reaching out for technical assistance at training@c4innovates.com. And again, thank you all for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.